pas la montagne, si vous n'aimez pas la ville, allez vous faire foutre.
Hello and thanks for joining us for our weekly film show. Can France's movie theatres survive the pandemic's second wave? As the country enters into its second lockdown, it's lights out once again for cinemas. The shutdown is for a month, but depending on the health situation, it could be extended. Catherine Viette has more.
C'est ton grand-père qui faisait qu'on était une famille. L'incinération, ça sera dans 5 jours.
Je serai pas là, j'ai un avion demain pour la Grèce.
C'est une blague?
DNA, the latest film from French director Mai Wen, stopped dead in its tracks barely 48 hours after its release. With the second lockdown, it's once again lights out for France's cinemas. Movie buffs will find the doors closed at least until December 1st. Films set for release in November and December are being rescheduled for later dates. That's the case for A Night Doctor by Yili Wajman.
Si ça va, j'arrête, je veux tout arrêter, d'accord? Je vais arrêter avec ces ordonnances. Tiens, non mais t'arrêtes pas maintenant. Si t'arrêtes maintenant aussi, puis il va venir ici, il va défoncer ma pharmacie.
A highly anticipated film noir, it was due to hit screens on December 9th. Now, with the distributor's blessing, its release has been postponed. No new date has yet been set. Movie theaters, too, are feeling the pinch. At the beginning of the year, with the first lockdown, cinema attendance plummeted some 63% compared to the same period last year. From January to September 2020, there were 50 million tickets sold, compared to 139 million in 2019.
It's a hard blow for us, obviously, but also for the spectators. But we will bounce back. We don't have to worry about that. You have to bide your time. There are human lives at stake.
There's a small consolation this time around. What the government calls preparatory work remains allowed. That means castings and filming can continue as long as strict health guidelines are followed. A tiny ray of hope for an industry battered by the pandemic.
Well, we're joined now by our film critic, Lisa Nesselson. Hello, Lisa. Now, is there any hope for the film world?
Well, this latest lockdown is particularly frustrating for all aspects of the industry because people were definitely getting back into the habit of going out to the movies. And French films were attracting viewers they might not have if there were big Hollywood movies showing at the same time. Considering the role of culture in the French economy and in French life, it was shocking to me, and I'm not alone, that President Macron didn't mention the culture sector in his speech announcing a second lockdown. Now, the message that sends is that movies are not an essential sector. I'd argue that they're essential to the people who make their living in the film industry. Independent booksellers were not happy to learn that they're optional to unnecessary, but carry-out coffee and fries are somehow essential components of daily life. In a gesture I find touching, the Minister of Culture on November 5th announced that postage will be free for bookshops to send books to customers. Alas, you can't send the communal thrill of movie-going through the mail. High-ranking officials have urged people to steer clear of ordering cultural goods from Amazon. Now, it may be convenient, but it's not a French company. They don't pay their fair share of taxes, and their streaming service doesn't contribute what it should to the French film and television industries.
And with brick and mortar cinemas shut until the 1st of December and quite possibly beyond, streaming options come to the rescue once again. France's leading public television channels France 2 and France 3 are spotlighting 14 first films by French and French-Canadian directors who went on to have noteworthy careers. Tell us some more.
Well, even if you're not a film buff, this is like a restaurant menu where some of the dishes are memorably tasty, but even the lesser entrees are worth sampling. But unlike the offerings in a restaurant, these 14 films are free of charge. If you're in France, they're available to stream at no cost through January. Now, and for those who are counting, half of these movies were written and directed by women, not because there are quotas, there aren't, but because that's the natural evolution of filmmaking in France.
Now, some of these films go back almost 3 decades. When you saw them for the first time when they were released, could you have predicted the careers that these directors went on to have?
Hard-hitting question. Actually, my track record is pretty good. I looked up my reviews. Now, of Matthew Kassavitz's Matisse from 1993, I wrote, quote, Matisse, a hip interracial comedy with jaunty rap-inflected score, is bound to generate good word of mouth in France. Grounded in the reality of multi-ethnic city life, this streetwise 100% French answer to She's Gotta Have It from 25-year-old writer, director, actor Matthew Kassavitz doesn't develop its characters so much as it defines them by playing against racial and cultural stereotypes. End quote. Not bad. I was completely won over by Celine Sciamma's Water Lilies in 2007. Now, it was shot in the Paris suburb of Cergy, where Sciamma grew up, and I noted 13 years ago that, quote, parents and other authority figures are so tangential that the middle-class burb could be called no adult supervision, end quote. In 2011, I raved about a movie called 17 filles, or 17 girls, taking inspiration from a real-life example in the US in 2008, the sister writing and directing team of Delphine and Muriel Coulin have made an altogether French film populated with fresh-faced and energetic young women as stubborn and gung-ho as they are oblivious. Tailor-made for festivals, this feature debut, after 5 noteworthy shorts, marks the sisters as talents to watch.
And how did they turn a true American oddity into a French movie?
Well, when one headstrong young woman found herself accidentally pregnant, over a dozen of her high school classmates deliberately decided to join her, to all get pregnant at the same time. The directors transplanted a bunch of misguided American girls into a bunch of misguided French girls.
Okay, well, it certainly sounds like it's worth a look. Here's a glimpse at 17 Girls by Delphine and Muriel Coulin.
560 € avant la naissance et 748 après.
Non mais si on met tout en commun, on peut prendre un immense appart.
Avec des grandes chambres.
On s'organise. On se fera émanciper, comme ça on se tapera pas les éducateurs et leur foyer. Là.
Ouais, on n'aura pas d'horaire du genre, enfin, on doit rentrer le soir à une certaine heure et tout. On se gère quoi.
Ouais, comme on sera ensemble, on pourra s'organiser.
Faudra surtout s'organiser pour faire des tours. Ouais, pour tout ce qui est chiant.
Ouais, vaisselle, le ménage et tout quoi.
Mais surtout, on n'entendra plus jamais les réflexions du style range ta chambre.
Viens manger. Refais ton lit. Non mais refaire son lit quoi, j'ai jamais compris. Tant donné qu'on s'y retrouve juste tous les soirs.
Now, in case you're wondering whether I ever get things completely wrong, I did write back in 1992 that there was scant future for Benicio del Toro because I didn't like his performance in a Christopher Columbus movie. A word about streaming. It's a wonderful option during lockdown, of course. But before you just mindlessly watch stuff, including YouTube, keep in mind that you're heating up the planet needlessly by using servers. In terms of environmental impact, watching a half hour of streaming video is the equivalent of taking a train for 300 kilometers.
I'm glad you're here to remind us of that, Lisa. Now, speaking of first films, a modern classic is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year in a sparkling 4K restoration. Tell us about Breathless, the movie that put Jean-Luc Godard on the map.
Dare I say that Breathless was a breath of fresh air? Well, it still is. Jean-Luc Godard is still alive and working in Switzerland. He'll be 90 on December 3rd, and it's hard to picture post-war cinema without him. Breathless depicts the ill-fated romance between an American journalist in Paris, played by Jean Seberg, and a gangster with an ineffable sense of style, played by Jean-Paul Belmondo. It put a radically irreverent French spin on Godard's affection for American gangster movies, and it's difficult now to picture just how much of a shock it was 6 decades ago. Bad language, loose morals, and a free and easy, not to mention erratic, filming style that popularized the then novel Jump Cut. To reassure the producer, François Truffaut wrote a loose script based on a true incident. Claude Chabrol, who had arguably launched the French New Wave a year or two earlier, was listed as technical advisor. You had to be 18 to see the finished film because it was believed that Belmondo's amoral character might corrupt minors. It was a 23-day shoot with no sync sound, and Jean Seberg was paid $16,000, which was 1/6 of the total budget.
And Jean Seberg was found dead in a car here in Paris in the summer of 1979. She was a fascinating figure, wasn't she?
Oh, yes. Seberg's connection to both her native USA, she was born in Marshalltown, Iowa, and to France was very strong. Now, after winning a talent contest in 1957 at age 17, she got her start playing noted French military strategist and martyr Joan of Arc for director Otto Preminger in his film Saint Joan. She actually caught fire during the burning at the stake scene, although her injuries were minor. She was passionately interested in the plight of the disadvantaged from an early age. Very early, she tried to join the NAACP, that's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, when she was 14. When, as a well-paid adult actress, she donated money to a school meal program run in Oakland, California by the Black Panthers. The FBI's J. Edgar Hoover decided he hated her so much that a ghastly smear campaign was mounted against her. Now, it's a sad and fascinating example of Hoover's tactics, and much of it is revisited in a rather good film from last year, starring Kristen Stewart as Seberg. Seberg was married to French writer Romain Gary, who sneakily won France's top literary award, the Prix Goncourt, twice with an additional novel under the assumed name Émile Ajar. Now, because Breathless was shot on location in Paris, it's great fun to compare the Champs-Élysées as it was in 1959 and the way it is now. And I'm all for living in the present, but in this case, I vote for back then.
Okay, Lisa, I've learned a lot as always. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to leave you now with a snippet from the trailblazing Breathless. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Oui, je suis emmerdé. Connaissez-vous ce garçon?
Tu es fou.
You have enjoyed your program with Air France Protect, promising you a pleasant trip with total peace of mind.